Got it, thank you. You guys run a really well-oiled neighborhood association, and thank you to Eric and James. They really, I think, set the bar. I think this, out of all the 13 neighborhood associations, you are consistently high attendance, high engagement, and I really appreciate it because it is a partnership. As we've said, it isn't just government versus citizens, it's a partnership to help really create the kind of Bend we want to have. And we're going to talk about that partnership because we need to make some improvements. We need to really reflect why we all are here. It's a very livable, great place. We have great schools, great parks. It is a fantastic place to raise a family. I've got 2 kids, and I wouldn't be anywhere else. I love this place, but it's changing and it's growing. Some people say the most common thing is, can't you just make this road stop and just make it so you can freeze it in time? I have those moments where, yeah, that would be nice, but we also have opportunity in front of us. People want to be here, so how do we shape that investment and, again, create a Bend that is reflective of our values? And that's not me, that's all of us together. So do you mind driving the slide deck there? So why we live here. We just got, you saw on the news, number 3 fastest growing city in the country. We've been between 4th, 5th, 6th fastest growing cities over the last couple of years. So I think we must be doing something right because it is a desirable place. But we have challenges, and I want to talk and be real about the challenges that we face. One of the things that I think is really good to remember, though, as we are dealing with traffic and congestion and headaches and all that, and sewer and infrastructure issues, is that our economy is becoming more diverse. So we have really grown from that, one-trick pony, the mill town, to now having a really diverse education. We've got higher education, diverse economy. So we're finally creating opportunity. So your kids want to be here, grandkids want to be here. It's becoming a community that is really more accessible to more people. But we've got challenges around housing and transportation. Those are our 2 biggest issues that we're dealing with at the city right now. We do a pretty in-depth council goal setting process. And so we are trying to correct the housing problem and create some relief with all those upward pressures on housing prices by just increasing the supply. 74% of the American cities have a housing affordability problem, and most of that is as a result of just not keeping pace with the recession, and we are underbuilt, and there's labor costs, and that's a whole other presentation. I'm not going to get into that today. I am going to talk about transportation. That is where there's a huge opportunity. So, transportation. So today our presentation is going to be kind of big picture. I'm going to kind of give you just a real high-level story of how the Bend transportation system works. We have a really engaged 2-year citizen involvement process that is developing a transportation system plan that'll really be the projects and programs that we need up until 2040 to accommodate the growth that we're seeing in Bend. So you're going to hear about that. And we're going to talk about how we pay for that. So that's the flow. So I'm going to take you through a little bit of so again, council goals, transportation, housing, the big focus. We can go to the next one. But there's other things that we're working on. It's not the only one, but today I want to just focus on transportation. So go to the next slide. So kind of the 5 things that you need to know about transportation in Bend. And so I want to actually point a few things out in the map. I'm going to take these one by one. First off, our development patterns. And I know this might be hard to see in the back of the room, but if you look at the map of Bend, it has that classic, what you'd see in most cities, that classic grid. Streets that are perpendicular, right in the core, fairly connected. It was plotted by, as most cities were in the West in the early 1900s, and it was plotted for a city of about 5,000. And it was plotted, it slowly kind of grew into that city of 5,000 as the mills really dominated employment. And then that growth was very steady. It really didn't change much. It was 5,000, and then maybe 20 years later it was 7,000 or 8,000, and then 20 years later another few thousand. Not much change. So that grid actually really accommodated, the folks here in Bend. Then all of a sudden things started people started to recognize Central Oregon. Black Butte, Sun River, those people would come over here and say, okay, I'd like to see if I can make it go. And as our technology evolved, we started to see Bend developed, especially on the outskirts. This is one area that's prime for that. More of a rural setting. People don't move to Central Oregon because they want another urban setting. They wanted that rural kind of lifestyle. So a lot of our transportation patterns were kind of follow the meandering roads, subdivisions, things like that people like. And I think that's, that's a quality that a lot of us share, of wanting that sort of peace and serenity, not that block and grid system, but we had to plug it into that block and grid system. So it's a challenge because it is not, in terms of connectivity, getting a road going from one part of town to the other, it's a challenge. And then I think one of the most obvious things is we've got a river running through our town, we've got Aubrey Butte, Pilot Butte, we've got 5 irrigation districts that run through Bend, that create these canals. We have a railroad that goes through it. A lot of these physical barriers that, in terms of how we get across them and the challenges that they present, are part of our transportation story. Growth cycle. So Bend really started to grow in the 90s and 2000s, which is a little different than a lot of cities that were post-World War II, where you had cities building out east and even in the west, and they had the advantage of having state and federal government money. So there was money at that time. So think of Eisenhower with the interstate system that was built. Think of states that would invest heavily in infrastructure. That was all happening in the 50s and 60s. That was not when Bend was growing. So Bend grew at a time when money was not available from the state or federal government. So it's really on us as the local community to pay for improvements to our transportation system. So we kind of missed it. Our growth cycle occurred when the money wasn't there. So that's been a challenge. And then also along came property tax restrictions. So many folks don't know, Bend has the lowest tax rate, property tax rate. So I'm not saying total property taxes, but what you pay for the City of Bend services, it's about 20% of your property tax bill. Many people don't know that. They look at, well, doesn't that all go to the city? No, we get about 20 cents of the dollar that you pay. Just get property tax statements are just about to go out if they haven't already. And most folks don't understand that concept. And that tax rate, the millage rate of what your property is assessed at, has been the same since 1981. So Bend's property tax rate is $2.80. That has not changed in close to 40 years. And that cannot change because voters in Oregon in the 90s froze everybody's taxes. Measures 5 and measures 50, 1990 and 1996. So your property taxes have not kept pace with the needs of the community. So despite being the 3rd fastest growing city in the country, the additional revenue that we received is 5%. So people look at, oh, well, property values are going like this. There is a disconnect between what a property is actually worth and what it's taxed. Huge disconnect. And the tax assessed value can grow at 3% a year. Of course, your property has been growing at a very different rate, and that's, a lot of folks don't understand that. And so again, that's another challenge that we have of not having a general tax base, or even the council does not have the ability to make changes. The council cannot raise taxes. The only way that taxes to general tax rate can be increased is for specific projects or for an operating levy for a specific purpose, but that is only every 5 years. The 4th point is transportation. I think people just kind of expect it's public service. It can just be expected to happen. It's not like your water or sewer bill where you're paying a monthly charge for that service. It is, you do pay for it at the pump. There is a federal and a state gas tax that you pay. Federal gas tax hasn't been changed since 1990 something. State has just increased their tax. It's a phase-in in 2017. But the fuel tax is also, as cars are getting more efficient, it's not a sustainable revenue, so it's a challenge. And there's just not a really good sort of user fee. It's not like a water or sewer bill where you're paying for it based on your usage. And then lastly, I think people always say Bend's a fast-growing city, can't developers just make these improvements. Well, they do. They pay for their impact on growth through system development charges. So an average single-family home, before it can even gets built, there's a fee, about $20-some thousand, that every single family home is built that is to account for their growth on parks, sewer, water, and roads. So there is that, but the fees that collects, it's about, on average, like for transportation, for example, it's last couple of years, it's been $8-9 million per year. It takes a while to accumulate those funds, so it doesn't people's expectation is that project gets built before the development comes in, but as you're collecting those fees, the timing is off. It's hard to catch up. So investments are needed into the Bend's transportation system, and it's hard to rely just on development revenue as a way to make improvements. So this is just another illustration of that tax issue that I talked about, of Bend's tax rate, what you're paying for police, fire, and a little bit of streets. So 90% of what we spend, what we call the general fund, which is where your property taxes go, is 90% of that expense is for police and fire, public safety, and streets. And that's about $528 that we're collecting per median tax assessed valued home. So that pays for police, fire, and about 50 of those $528 is for street maintenance. So we get money from the state, from that gas tax, and then we supplement a little bit with the general fund to help pay for it. So we have been doing all we can. We know that we need to make improvements to the transportation system. There's no secret here. There's things that were done in 2011. In the middle of the recession, we had a retiring bond, and we were very cost conscious. We said we want to ask the voters for money, but we want to make sure that it's not a tax increase. And so that capacity was $30 million. Well, we had $30 million, so what could we do to improve safety? And we needed to make sure that we had projects throughout the city, because the entire population has to vote on any kind of tax increase. Voters approved it in 2011. So what you see in that kind of green color are projects that happened around the city that were part of that $30 million bond. And I'm going to talk about Reed Market, because we're not done with Reed Market. I think people say, well, what happened? That didn't fix anything. Well, it fixed some things, but yes, there is still more to do on Reed Market. That's kind of the transportation story, I guess, is that even the Parkway was done 20 years ago. It's not done. So I think people's misconception is when they see work happening on a project, well, can't you just do it all? No, because there's limited funding. So you can you're strategic. You try to leverage some of the funds that you get. You do as much as you can. So that's what's in green, is what the transportation bond did. We heard loud and clear that the community wants to do as much as we can to improve our transportation system. So council, through its biennial budget and goal setting process that they did, raised system development charges. So that's the impact fees that we charge developers. So those have been raised by about 30-40% over the last really couple of years. It was done in phases. And then we also raised franchise fees. Those are fees that private and public utilities pay to use our right-of-way. So the right-of-way is the street, so there's pipes and wires and things underneath that street, and that's the rate that the city charges. So we raised those fees because they have what's called discretion. We can use them for things that we deem a priority. We did what we could kind of with local revenue sources within our control. Again, we didn't raise taxes, we just used those sources. And what you see in blue are projects to help deal with congestion. Really the primary focus was congestion. So you see the two big signature projects, one of which you're going to hear about tonight, is creating better east-west connectivity. So getting Murphy all the way punched through, up and over the railroad to provide another option to take some of that stress off of Green Market. And then on the north end, taking Empire and connecting it to 27th. Those two projects alone are about $60 million. They're very expensive, putting bridges, intersection improvements. So of what council did to raise those fees to create a revenue stream, to then we go out and issue debt. We don't cash fund these projects. For a 30-year debt that we issue, that allowed us to do the 72 million in total. But again, 60 of it was captured in those two projects. We've also committed to improving specific intersections, 9th and Wilson, up at Neff and Purcell, 27th and Connors, Columbia and Simpson, the Reed Market and Bond. So there is another roughly 15 million outside of that 60 million that is to help improve some of those key bottlenecks. So it's a lot. So finished the GEO bond, $70 million in the works, but we're not done. We need to do more. And so we're going to transition now and talk about the plan. But before we do that, next slide, I do want to talk about Reed Market, because I know that's a hot topic. And so people say, well, why don't you just do the whole thing? Why did you only do part of it? Or why isn't just widen it to 4 lanes? I know those are real concerns. The challenge with Reed Market, I just wanted to make sure that people understood the context, We had a limited $30 million bond. We wanted to use it strategically to rebuild the road and improve safety, but it's not done. And some of the big challenges that you see in this diagram is we have a railroad, we have a canal, we have 9th Street as well as American Lane coming in. So how do you get over a canal, take a bridge, get over that canal, get over the railroad, but still have that north-south connectivity? The same thing getting into 3rd Street. There's challenges with right-of-way. There's also challenges with how Green Market intersects the Parkway. And we're going to talk about projects that are in this potential bond that we're going to ask of the voters, that we're building towards improvements beyond what I just mentioned to make some improvements. But I just wanted folks to make sure that we know that Green Market needs attention. And it is on the plan, and it's a big focus for this transportation bond moving forward. So I'm going to turn it over to Karen Swirsky, who's leading the transportation plan, the 2040 plan. So that's a bunch of transportation projects. And then we'll get more specific about what's in front of us right now, kind of on a short-term list of projects.
Thanks, Eric. So I was in front of you guys just about a year ago. We were at that point about 6 months into the update of the transportation plan, so we've got a whole year of work under our belt now. I'm going to give you just a quick summary of what we've done since that period of time. The project is in phases. We are currently in phase 3, which I think is the most interesting part. In this phase, we have done a tremendous amount of public outreach. As Eric mentioned, we have a 25-person citizen advisory committee that we work really hard. We have almost monthly meetings, and they're typically 3 hours, and they have huge packets to read, so they're really amazing citizen volunteers. Those folks have worked to develop what we call the 2040 project list. It includes programs as well. I've lost count, but I think there's somewhere around 187 projects on that list, pretty much what the universe of things that we need for 2040. What we're doing right now is narrowing that list down and putting the projects into timing buckets, so near, mid, and long term, and matching that to funding. Next slide, I think. We did, I'm sure some of you came to the neighborhood meeting that we had. It was about a year ago, it was last January, actually. And we had almost 400 people attend those meetings. We got lots and lots of great input. A big percentage of the projects that wound up on the project list were projects identified by folks like you that we wanted to make sure we captured. The priorities reflect the goals. And the goals were developed, transportation goals, I think I showed you last time, were developed with council and the committee. And we looked at all 6 of those criteria when we were trying to figure out which were the most important projects to seek funding for first. So one of the things obviously is capacity. That's related to congestion. That's how efficiently the roads move people. We also really, really heard a lot about safety. So people want new projects, but they want them to be safe. And there were a lot of projects that were identified specifically for safety. One of them was the intersection of Bear Creek and Pettigrew, where it moves into Purcell. Believe it or not, that's one of our highest crash intersections in the city. It's a giant 4-way stop. So we've identified that as a project that needs to come up, get probably a roundabout, put there in as soon as we can. Connectivity is a big issue too. When I say connectivity, I mean new roads. New, especially in this part of town, which was developed on a more rural pattern, sometimes you don't have a lot of choices in how you get from A to B, so we're looking at opportunities to increase that grid that Eric was talking about. A really interesting example of that is, does anyone know where Ani Road is? Yeah, so I didn't either. So it's the road, you know where Crux? Everyone knows where Crux is, right? So that road that goes behind Crux, it goes under the Parkway. There's a big bridge there. That's called Ani. Well, if you took Ani and made it into a real road and extended it to 3rd, it unloads a lot of congested intersections, because our big issue in Bend is getting east-west. There's some north-south issues too, but our big issue, because of what Eric was saying, all those barriers. So we're looking at all of those, and then finally, we want our projects to be fundable. It's great to have a list. Lots of cities have transportation plans that I call wish lists, but we wanted to make ours real. So we've been working really hard with the subcommittee of the Citizen Advisory Committee to develop a funding plan that's actually plausible, realistic, possible. We took all those projects, so you can see lots of projects and lots of money, and we put them into, we call them time buckets or priorities. Everyone wants everything to happen in the near term, and most of our important projects are in the near term. But that is, as you get further out in time, we'll have to identify other funding mechanisms. Near-term projects include things like the safety project I just mentioned, quite a few intersection improvements. So it's a long list, it's an exciting list, includes both of all of those criteria that I showed you on the slide before. So to wrap up, I was just going to kind of make the full circle from what Eric was talking about, Reed Market. We heard loud and clear that Reed Market has issues. Some of the issues that affect Reed Market affect other roads in the city. So the railroad switchyard is a big problem. It's unpredictable, and it can be a really long time, but it's worse for you guys down in this part of town because you don't have a lot of alternatives. So one of the things that we're going to be doing is a study to start with, to look at what's the best way forward. Is it possible to move the switchyard out of Bend? We'll still have a train running through, you'll still have to stop at the train, but it isn't going to be for, who knows, 20 minutes, 40 minutes, who knows, right? So that's one alternative. The other alternative is what Eric was talking about. Is there a way for at least Reed Market to go over the railroad without disrupting the other important north-south linkages? So we'll be taking a deep dive into that. And it was important to everyone that we actually not just do a study, but we figure out a way to implement it in the near term. So there's money in the near term budget for that. We're also going to take that roundabout that's at 15th in Reed Market. It's kind of not really one or the other. It's not really a two-lane roundabout. It's not a one-lane roundabout. It causes a lot of confusion. So we're going to just make it a two-lane roundabout. It will be easier to understand, and it will have more capacity. So, and then the last thing that we need to do with Reed Market is more subtle. It's more of a safety issue, but it has to do with how you get on the parkway from Reed Market, that very strange intersection, and people quite often do wrong, and there's a lot of crashes there. So we're partnering with ODOT to take a look on the best way to fix that interchange area. So the next speaker is going to be Susanna Julber, who's working on the funding strategy for this transportation plan.
Hey, hi everyone. I'm Susanna Julber, and some of you might remember me from septic to sewer. Now I'm working on transportation stuff. So I'm going to talk a little bit about funding for these, at least the transportation near-term priority projects. So all those projects that Karen was talking about, there's a lot of information on those on the city's website, and we'll show you the links to that if you're interested in looking at the projects. But these are sort of the funding principles that funding work group that's part of the Citizen Transportation Advisory Committee. This is sort of their funding principles. So they want the funding to be diversified, intentional, so that means not putting all our eggs in one bucket for funding. I'll talk about the different tools that cities mostly use for funding transportation infrastructure, but not relying on one egg, basically spreading out the eggs to make more of an omelet, I guess. So we want full funding for priority projects. We want the funding to be flexible and really phased and sustainable over a long term. As Eric was talking about, we have some real challenges with sustainable transportation funding. We did the bond a few years ago. Now we're getting more money from the state legislature after they passed some funding for road maintenance, but transportation funding is really siloed in a lot of ways. It's really restricted on what you can spend it on, so we need to have like the full menu of funding options. And so these are some of the possible funding tools. Some of these require a vote, either of the citizens of Bend or for the vehicle registration fee, which is used in a lot of other counties. It's the Deschutes County and then all of the cities within Deschutes County. So that's probably, if we are going to pursue something like a vehicle registration fee, that's probably a little bit more in the future because it's going to need a lot of community buy-in from not just us, but everybody else in the region. So I won't go through all of these. I know we've got more stuff on the agenda tonight, but the one we're really focusing on now, we've done some public opinion research and we'll be doing more. Council's really interested in exploring the idea of a big general obligation bond. What the size of that is, we're not quite sure yet, but it's still in the research phase, and whether there's a community support to support some of those projects on that near-term project list that the CTAC has put forth in their planning to go to the voters in actually May of 2020. So let's see, at the end of September, Council had a work session focused on this and got direction to kind of pursue more public research, more public touch points, and continue our research to see if May is a good time to go or not. So other fees we could implement to fund other things like maintenance and safety projects, or the transportation utility fee. I'm not going to go through all of them, but go ahead. So this is kind of the location generally of those near-term projects. So they're pretty good spread out citywide. We feel like this layered on top of those capital improvement projects, the $73 million worth of projects that Eric talked about, that we already have programmed from our franchise fee increases and our transportation system development fee increases that developers pay. We're going to have a lot going on if we are successful in the bond measure. And so these projects are ones that will be tested with the community a little bit more, and there's details on these forthcoming. So the project list keeps getting refined as council looks at it more and more. So we didn't want to hand it out right now and have people get attached to certain projects that might not end up in the full measure if we go forward. And so this is kind of the transportation puzzle. So the bond can only fund bricks and mortar projects. So that's capital improvement projects. But we have a whole bunch of other transportation needs, and this is just getting to those needs. There's transit, winter operations, street maintenance, striping and sweeping, and snow removal, sidewalk trail maintenance. We'd like to start going into more of being a smart city, so that's using signals that talk to each other better, smart technology like a lot of larger cities are doing that can improve traffic flow with not a lot of capital investment. And so that's a different funding source than a bond. So that's why our funding plan or strategy overall needs to be much more sustainable and kind of a menu of options. So just today, we actually issued, we have this 1-minute survey we're doing, and this is not meant to be statistically valid information. Not even going to go there. There's a lot of rules in how you do that type of surveying that we've been doing on the site, but this is just a short, brief 1-minute survey. I've been told it takes less than a minute. And you can go online, we have flyers for it, and the link is on the city's website. But it just asks you, council's interested in knowing more about which east-west corridors you'd like to see improved, or maybe they're north-south. Would you prioritize, more safety crossings for schools and parks, community amenities over more traffic lanes, things like that. So you can go there and you can do it with a pen and paper tonight, but it's better if you do it online just for us, because within 45 minutes we have like 400 people take the survey today already, so I think we're going to have a lot of people taking it. So if you can do it online, that's just easier to pull the data from. So, and yeah, these are ways you can follow us, and I think that's it. Any questions, I guess, for Eric, Karen, or I? James is going to MC.
I just have a request that when you speak, you tell us what your title is. So I know we have a city manager.
Yeah.
Okay, so great question, and you guys are slacking there. Okay. Just kidding. So for questions, if you see this guy in the yellow aisle, this is Butch. He's one of our board members. He's going to be walking back and forth with a microphone. And so if you have a question, raise your hand. And Butch just walk up to him. This is going to be like a game show. If you three could please come into the blue area. And then this is the survey that they were talking about, if you want to handwrite it. But at the end of the evening, make sure you have our email address or our website, and we will have a link to this as well as our survey if you don't want to use this. So, first question.
I couldn't hear the person that spoke before, but I just asked a question that.
Is that turned on, Butch?
Pardon me?
I'm just making sure the microphone's turned on. I apologize.
Louder, Kelly.
All I've heard about tonight is cars, 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 and so often I would ride my bike, but I don't be able to safely get there. So I would like to see that addressed somehow with off-road paths on this side of town. It seems like over towards Northwest Crossing and stuff, there's all these wonderful paths. And then secondly, when we were talking about the Reed Market project years ago, this neighborhood association, we had meetings and meetings, and everybody stomped their feet and yelled and all about, the problem wasn't the intersection at 15th and Reed Market. The problem was getting over the railroad tracks, and we tried to tell the city that was going to just cause this horrendous backup because of the trains. And a lot of people said, save your bucks on the roundabout and put it towards getting over the railroad. Now all of a sudden you're coming to us saying, oh my goodness, there's an issue there. Maybe we can get over the railroad tracks in a while. And I just want to know, why didn't you listen to the neighborhood originally? I mean, anymore, it's like, why even bother to talk to the city staff? Because it doesn't seem like our opinion is taken as something valid. It's just an exercise in public comment.
Amen.
So we're going to address both of your questions. I just want to say very quickly, the neighborhood associations did hear everyone's requests, and they were all submitted, and there were some changes made to the road. But once again, every single thing that gets done is always a question of funding by the taxpayers and what they're willing to pay for. So I'm just going to state that as far as NA, as far as safety and other political issues, I'll let these two talk.
So, yeah, I mean, as I said earlier, we didn't have unlimited funds. If we had unlimited funds, that's exactly what we would do. It was, the roundabout was one of our highest, it was a safety issue that we were having at that intersection. Should we have done the overcrossing first? Yes, you can make that argument. I'm not disputing it. I'm just saying, when you do transportation projects, you typically can't do everything you want, and you pick, which pieces you can do. I think folks would say at the park, like using the parkway as the example, why is there a stoplight here? Why isn't this? And it all comes down to, we don't have unlimited funds, so we just make decisions, and I don't want to, I'm not apologizing or being defensive or anything like that. It's the reality of transportation. This is hard to fund. So I hear you.
So I want to talk about the fun part, which is the bicycle and pedestrian question. We heard that a lot from all the neighborhood associations. One of the top things people wanted was more connectivity for bicycles and pedestrians. So we have several things in the plan. One of them is what we're calling key routes. And I'm a senior planner, by the way. That's my title. There's a flyer back on the table that has some links in it. If you go to the web page for the transportation system plan, and the link is on that flyer, you'll find an interactive map. And what you want to do is go to that and look for the title Key Routes. And we've identified 12 different routes through Bend that are connected up projects that infill sidewalks, that create separated paths, that link up the city for bicycles and pedestrians. It's a really exciting concept, and it's something that we have not done before. On top of that, we're also implementing a programmatic approach to creating what we call a low-stress bikeway network and doing sidewalk infill. So it's a big part of the transportation plan.
Butch, next question. I'll just hit him up.
Hi, my name is Tom Buford, and I've lived now 12 years along Roster House Road. And my concern is over a lack of bus service. We need many stops along the beginning to the end of Roster House Road, all the way over to Murphy. And I've asked the city every year, and I get the same reply that they can't deal with that right now. And I'm wondering when we're finally gonna get an actual permanent bus route for stops, pickup, drop-offs.
So nobody heard that question about buses. So the city does not run the transit system. That's done through a separate governmental, Central Oregon Intergovernmental Council. They are regional, so they provide bus service for the whole region, and Bend's part of that. They did get funding, so they are going through an updated plan right now. Their funding tripled as part of that transportation package that the state approved in 2017. So in order to then get access to those funds, they have to do a plan. They are developing more higher frequency, more routes. That's actually going on right now. So I just encourage you to advocate for those specific routes.
We're closely, we are.
We're very coordinated, but make sure that goes directly to CYC, Cascade East Transit.
All right.
Yeah, we'll sure pass it on.
Yeah, hi, my name is Dan O'Neill. Okay, when he said.
Closer to your mouth, please, a little closer to your mouth.
Okay, hi, I'm Dan O'Neill. If these people do convert to a sewer system, right, that means the city's liable, right? If the sewer breaks, the city's liable, right? Yes or no?
The what?
Let's say the sewer breaks, they connect the sewer and the sewer breaks, is the city liable, yes or no?
The sewer?
Yeah,
Breaks?
Next time about the people that connect
to the sewer line, and it breaks.
Oh, it breaks.
Yeah.
It depends on if it's on the property line or.
Actually, that's a great question, and we are gonna be addressing the sewer issue in like 25
But it
minutes.
did happen about 2 years ago, and 50 homes were destroyed, and the city paid for 3. And the city told the rest of the people, deal with it, we're not liable.
I want to address that question, but I want to address it when we're talking about sewers. I'm just trying to stay on topic. So I will make sure that question gets answered by the representative from Wendy's.
Why isn't the city liable? See, people working in sewer tax.
No, like I said, I do not discount the question. We just need to address it appropriately because we need to keep everyone on topic.
Okay, I'll talk.
Butch?
Rather than overpass and rebarking, has there been any effort made to get the railroad to the underpass underneath?
Don't get me started on trying to talk. We've been talking with the railroad about all sorts of options, and that's, people hate to use the word study, right? Because you have that study on there, but that's part of it is can we, we're gonna look at all options. Can we go below, above, move it? But yeah, that's part of, we're trying to negotiate with BNSF right now.
Can I make
that happen? But it's a challenge.
I need to make since I'm not an elected or paid official, as far as power in this country goes, the railroads have so much power that goes back a century and a half, it's not even funny. So beyond what these people do for a living, I hear you, but railroads are, yeah.
I used to work for a congressman and they laughed. They didn't.
Another case in point, just I don't want to keep drilling on this, but they have in the contract, their union contract about switching yards, because we said, can you move the switching yards? And they said, well, that would be a violation of our union contract to move the switching yards.
Anyway, it's my turn. Okay, I want to talk about 27th and Wilderness Way. About 3 months ago, we had 2 accidents in 1 week at that intersection. And now we've called the city traffic committee and tried to get them to put a little asphalt onto the other side of the street where you could pass or have a turnout lane there. And the city is just shining us on every inch of the way. And so,
I'm not familiar with that, or
it's on a hill,
it's on what's now, 27th and where?
Wilderness Way.
Wilderness Way, okay, I'm not familiar with that. We can get back to you for sure. Oh, Ferguson? North of Ferguson, okay. I'm not familiar enough to be able to respond.
Well, anyway, it's at the entrance to Ponderosa Estates, and one of the guys that was in the accident was hurt real bad and had to take to the hospital and all that. All we need is a turnout lane there, that's it, a little gallon of paint, that's all we need.
So, that's a good plug for, we have this neighborhood street safety program, the council allocated $800,000 to prioritize, and we've asked each neighborhood association to prioritize their 2 top projects kind of on those types of things, like, is it just a little bit of paint, a little bit of this, it's not that expensive, can we get it done? We had 350 applications that were submitted. There's a process right now they're prioritizing. I believe in the whole farm, you're in the process of prioritizing your.
This program was initiated 2 months ago, I think, and maybe a little longer. And like Eric just said, lots and lots of applications all over town. The Old Farm Board just spent the last 2 weeks going through all the applications that were sent to the city regarding the Old Farm District. I did not see that particular one on, and it's probably just bad timing. So what I would like to say is hopefully we could get that addressed with the transportation system plan, which is in the process of getting finalized if it's not too expensive, because I do know that the 27th Street is getting upgrades of some safety issues.
CSR.
Okay. So another way to make sure it becomes truly official as a request, CSR, citizen service request, and that can be anything regarding infrastructure that deals with the city, whether it's a crosswalk, an intersection, a sign was taken down, anything like that. Very simple. We have links on our website to all of those issues that go to the city. And I'm sorry about that. Tell your neighbor that it can be addressed. People need to know, and I hate to say it, government, private business, anybody, they need to know before they can address the situation, and then if it's a simple fix, hopefully we can get it fixed.
Thank you.
Next question.
Okay, that's me. You addressed the issue with Pettigrew and Bear Creek, you're seeing as dangerous intersections where we stop, usually are. Why are we gonna spend millions of dollars again on a roundabout when a simple 4-way stoplight can be just as effective, just like it was effective at 15th and Reed-Market before you took it out?
Well,
Amen.
I can't address 15th and Reed-Market, but I will say, for safety reasons, roundabouts are our preferred intersection treatment. They are much safer than signals. So that is what we would do unless there were other reasons to put in a different treatment. And I will say the costs of signals and roundabouts are not that different.
They are that different, and lights can be done a lot faster and without a lot of the congestion.
We do evaluate we're doing a signal, it's not like we're immune to doing signals, we're doing a signal at Neff and Purcell right now, because the grade doesn't work, and for a roundabout, and the signal is, in that case, the signal in the roundabout, the signal is less expensive. We do look at each intersection and what's the best treatment, we don't just always carte blanche do roundabout, so I don't know if we're at the point where you can even decide roundabout or signal line, so it's not decided yet that that's a roundabout.
I understand that, but roundabouts are almost significant here in Bend, Oregon, and you're telling me all the rest of the United States with all their signals and 4-way stops are unsafe, but our roundabouts are safer. Is that what you're telling me?
There's research and data. This isn't something that we just invented, and research and data that demonstrate that roundabouts are safer.
Talk to a traffic cop and then tell me that. Thank you.
Butch, could you?
Thank you. My name is Gail Burge. Cameron, sorry, went back to my old name. My husband. Regarding the same roundabout, the Reed and 15, part of the problem is that it's the hybrid design. Part of it's single wide and part of it's double wide, and I got hit yesterday. My car did, not me physically, the car did. I was going north, turning to go towards the railroad, and as I was exiting, I'm crossing into the westbound towards the railroad, and the person coming in nearly T-boned me because she figured she had the right of way, because she doesn't know that you know, just because she's going right doesn't mean she has the right of way. Slammed on the brakes and I got hit in the rear. So this is not a safe design. A single one is safer than a hybrid, and a double is probably safer.
Yes.
But the hybrid was somebody's design of, well, let's do it half-ass.
Would this be an engineering question?
I mean, you're absolutely right, which is why we haven't planned as widening it to a full double lane roundabout. It's in the plan.
Hold on, this gentleman had his hand up.
My question is, yeah, I understand your roundabouts. My question is this: we have a lot of traffic on the bike lanes. My question in the bike lane: what are we going to do when we get battery-operated bikes faster than a person pedaling a bike? That's the problem. Right now, I will say your bikers on the bike lanes are very courteous. We try to give them the right of way when we can, but there is some that won't get it. And so therefore, if you have a battery-operated bike and a regular bike, somebody's gonna crowd somebody into the lane, and then the driver of the car is gonna be responsible for the battery.
Political policy question, or is that an engineering question?
It's an engineering.
Well, I'm making sure, because we do have a city council here, so.
I think part of it is a design issue. So one of the things that we're looking at with a new way of designing bicycle facilities is not just a narrow bike lane, but a buffered bike lane or protected path. And those need to be wide enough to accommodate obviously more than one cyclist. We actually have a lot of electric bikes in Bend now, and it's working fairly smoothly. So I think it's it's probably an education and a design issue.
Any other questions? Actually, Butch, come on, be a little polite, you know? Okay, she'll go, then we'll go to the gentleman in the black hat, and then over here.
Okay, I was just wondering, the road on American Lane, when you're going down it, because the congestion's so bad on Reed Market to get out to 97, and Roster House has been closed off in so many places, many of us are using the road off of American Lane that goes by Silver Rail, which I don't know the name of that. Brentwood. And that little part that needs paving so badly is horrendous. And people are parking on American Lane in front of a fire hydrant besides, so it makes it you can't even see to get out on that lane, back onto American Lane. And I'm just wondering, when will that be paved?
I don't know off the top of my head, but let's get back to you. So we have, we do 3-year payment plans, so we can let you know.
Well, so that was one of the questions that was submitted by a few people from the Neighborhood Street Safety Program. And it was more budget than the NSP, but there's a possibility it could still be part of the transportation system plan. But unfortunately, and this is my personal opinion, there is still an issue with, does something get done before the developer wants it, or does it get done after the developer goes in? So please, we're gonna put up, okay, here's our contact information for emails and our website. If you can send us that, then we can keep it in our queue, as well as make sure that city staff stays aware of that. But that was a very requested area of concern, especially with the Roster House construction.
Even gravel or something on it. I mean, it's just horrendous.
I absolutely agree. It goes right next to, it borders a school.
Yeah.
So it's an even greater concern than I think a lot of people know about.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
So I can probably get some answers to a couple of these questions. How do I get them back to these folks?
So if you have a question that does not get answered, or you would like a direct response, we have city staff here that will, when they have the official information in their office and they're sitting in front of their computer tomorrow, next week, they can get it back to you. So please, make sure they have your information, or email us so we can email the city with your information. But we ask for everyone's email at the check-in, so that, number one, you get our newsletter, which goes out monthly, and number two, so that if we need to respond to you when you respond to us, we can. And we don't work for the city. We literally are your neighbors.
And that flyer I mentioned to you in the back has my name, my phone number, and my email address. And I think these are, so I can at least find out the status of some of these things.
Okay, Butch, next person.
Are you guys watching the time?
Yes, we are. It says 7:45, correct? Yeah, remember, we started 20 minutes late. I apologize. Murphy Road, we're gonna cut that presentation in half from what we originally planned. Yes, sir, in the black hat.
Hi, my name is John. I've been Southeast Bend 32 years. I want to thank everybody, all of you for making out and for everybody. It's just that it's a slow evolution. What I see right now, and I've been here long enough, everything's a capacity. You know, there's certain times of day, all the way to Mount Bachelor to 27, it's filled, and that's without a train. But that's a problem, overpasses, whatever you want to think about. I mean, that really is a thing. It's congested now. It is packed to the max.
So your question, for people that haven't heard him, he's basically saying everything is a capacity.
Well, you know, I guess my question, another thing to this gentleman here with the electric bike, I've had one for 8 years, and I can go past all of you. At speed, you can try and run me over or whatever, but I'm there. Everybody should try one of those bikes.
Okay. So he's a proponent for electric bikes, folks. There's nothing wrong with that. We're going to do three more questions on this topic.
I guess I've got a question for Karen. My wife and I have lived on Broster House Road near Crash Corner for 30 years. And for anybody who doesn't know where that is, it's near the old Trap Club. And Roland is right behind us on our 1 acre. Chase has been identified to connect with Broster House at that sharp corner for nearly 40 years. And Hayden got approval for an 82 lot, 15 acre subdivision by Karen Swenson and the group to do one way in and one way out on Chase without connecting the corner there at Chase and Broster House. I want to know how that's possible.
That Chase Road is on the bond list that we talked about, so it is on that short-term 0 to 10 years. I can't speak to that specific development, but I can say that project is on the list to get done.
If I could just finish though, quickly. Karen Swenson said that the only solution that we see, according to the computer, is a traffic circle, the almighty traffic circle. 40 years ago, they would have just run it straight through and put a stoplight, some turn lanes, or a three-way stop, and get done with it and get it done. Keep it simple, use that principle. But a traffic circle is going to involve too much real estate, 3 different properties that people have to die or sell. It's going to take 25 years to open up that real estate to build a traffic circle. So straight through, keep it simple, and get it going before those 82 homes and 400 plus homes on Stone Creek turn into thousands of cars.
It's on the list.
Yeah, it's on the list.
If it's on the list, then just make sure we're following how it gets done.
You can go online and see all the details on that list. I just don't have it.
Daryl?
Yeah, this is a question for Mr. King. You guys are doing a great job coming out and getting a sense of where we are and all that. My question for you is about your bosses, about the council. The last time you came out, you did a good job trying to educate us, and then you had a couple of councilors who came in and said, we have plenty of money. How confident are you that the council is on the same page?
Well, that's probably a good question for, I'm gonna turn that over to right there. That's a great one.
Talk about passing the buck.
Oh, yeah. And I'll just correct James a little bit. Eric doesn't have one boss, he has 7. And, no, really, I think the general consensus on council is that everybody's rowing in the same direction. And I think it'll boil down to what projects are on the bond list. But I think we definitely have 6 votes for sure, to get this thing moving forward. And even the last one, I think it's just a matter of making sure the right project mix is there to make sure that we're addressing people's concerns of traffic safety and traffic congestion. So whether we do a statistically valid survey or focus groups, those 2 raise right to the top of everybody's concern list, is to address the congestion and to make sure that the transportation system is safe.
One last question on this topic. I'll let Butch pick.
Eric Paulson. I just have a question. One thing I hadn't heard mentioned yet, we talked about Reed Market and 15th and everything, and we talked about Purcell and Bear Creek. I haven't heard anything about 15th and Wilson and 9th, which Wilson and 9th, it's a 4-way stop, but it's really an 8-way stop because there's 2 lanes coming from every direction. And that to me has always been a really problematic spot. So I'd love to hear about that.
The 9th, sorry, I think I just went over really quickly. It is on the, outside of the bond, it's on our list, our CIP list that was funded, 9th and Wilson, to make improvements to that intersection.
So, I know there's a few other questions, but for the, all right, just you, and then for the sake of time, we're gonna move on to the next topic. If you still have questions regarding transportation, please get Karen's information, email them to us, we will forward them along.
My name is Don Thompson, I live in Kings Forest. When I lived in Albany, they had a very similar problem to the railroad crossing on Reed Market. The city put up a sign, and if the train stopped for more than 12 minutes, there was a phone number, which would be an email address now, that they sent information to the city. The city collected several $100,000 fines from the railroad company, which is BNSF. The railroad actually then fixed the problem on Queen Avenue in Albany because it was a throat to the switching. And I think that would work here. I'd be happy to take a picture of my phone of the railroad car, email it to an address. The city then could file a complaint with the railroad.
I'm open to it. My wife's from Albany. We're gonna be there this weekend with her family, doing a family, so I will make sure to get more information on what Albany is doing. I'm curious about that.
And it just worked.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, once again, any other transportation questions? And I'm sure there's going to be more after this evening as they pop in your head or if you already have them. This is us, this is the city, we can get you in touch. Now we're gonna slide to the Murphy Road Corridor project.